I've been making homemade movies since I was a kid, and over the years, I've seen lots of technology change. But what's the one thing that always stays the same? The one thing that you always need to make a movie? The camera, right. So basically, I'm going to give you a little history of all the different cameras I used over the years. I figured this would be fun. I'm not going off a script or anything like that, and I'm not going to get too much into the technical aspects, just, just what they meant to me over the years. So this right here is a Super 8 camera shot on film, and I used this in the 80s. This was one of the first things I ever filmed on. I don't know exactly if this is the same camera, but it's been in my family. It's very possible. Either way, it was similar to this. It was similar in shape. You would load the film in here. So that's where it goes. Ran on what looks like AA batteries right in here. The film would typically come on spools like this. This one right here is labeled Christmas 1980, so it's possibly the first footage that was ever filmed of me, or if not, pretty close. This is just the leader here. I don't want to take the actual film out, but you would shoot this. The major thing about film that I never liked was that you had to wait for it to get developed. So you had to take this somewhere when you were done, and then it was just this period of suspense to wait and see, like, hey, what did we get? What did it look like? And then it would come back and it would look like garbage. You didn't know if you shot it right or it was underexposed or whatever. But that was the only way. That was it until video. In college, I shot 16 millimeter. I don't have any of those cameras with me because those were all, property of the school. I didn't like shooting film in school because the same reasons. I felt like you were compromising the shot by not seeing exactly what you were getting. It was always that waiting period. Lots of times I got footage back from the lab and it was just plain black, like nothing was there or something was wrong with it. It was overexposed, whatever. And the type of camera I used most of the time in college was a Bolex, and the Bolex was terrible. I hated this thing because, first of all, you have to wind it, and there's this handle on the top, and it's bottom heavy, so you're just kind of like all the weight is like on your wrist, and it doesn't really make any sense. You can't hold it in any comfortable way. It wasn't really good for creativity. I felt I was always compromising the shot. There were many other 8mm cameras that have been in my family for a while, like this one right here. This was my grandfather's. Really strange. It looks like a little robot or something, but yeah, this is what they were like. He told me, I believe he told me that this was from 1951. I'm really not sure. So you would take this, you'd wind it up, and then you push down this right here, and this is how you record. And it's still pretty cool. So that's where you load the film in right here. This is another one here. Don't ask me how this one works. I'm really not sure, but it's similar to a Bolex. It looks like it, at least. A lot tinier because it's 8mm. So there's, I assume, the recorder. I always thought these dials were kind of interesting. Also, this lens here seems like it comes off. So does it come off? Yeah. So you could probably, attach some different lenses on it there. It was in the late 80s when my family started renting VHS cameras. Now, renting a camera because they were expensive. So we didn't own it. That's why I can't show you the actual camera right now. But it was mainly just for recording birthday parties or something. So we'd rent it on, a special event. This is the size tape, so I'm pretty sure, just in case, you're not familiar, this is a VHS tape. But this type of camera, it was kind of bulky and it was expensive, like I said. So eventually we got this camera that shot on these type of tapes. This is a VHS-C tape, VHS compact. So basically, this is the first time we actually owned a camera of our own. This was the family camera. This is the actual one right here. I'm surprised I still have it. I found it in my attic, and basically, this is the camera that really got me started making movies. This thing right here is the camera that made Cinemassacre. This is it. It looks pretty small, but actually, if you add the battery, that adds like half of the weight almost right there. These batteries were huge. So we got this camera in 91, and that became my main camera for most of the 90s. The tape itself, the only inconvenience was that you could only shoot for about 30 minutes. That you didn't typically have a player to play back these size tapes. I mean, you could play it straight from the camera. So usually what I would do for these, you'd have this tape extender, which was very common. So what you do here, you open up the door, you put the tape in. A little awkward doing it for the camera, you know, right now it's a little different. So you pop that in and listen to this here. So what it actually does, it stretches the tape out. So it actually turns it into a full-size VHS tape. And then you could insert this into your VCR and you're set. And it runs on a battery. Here you go, just a plain old AA. Yep, AA. This camera, it got me through a lot of years. I filmed a lot of movies on this camera. I could see a lot of damage to it. It's a little bit beaten up. You know, we've taken a use out of it. Now, of course, this was a family camera. This wasn't actually like, I wasn't allowed to just take the camera and run with it and make my own movies, but very gradually I started getting more and more permission, you know, from my parents. And I guess they were happy that, you know, it kept me out of trouble and everything. And I got to nurture some kind of hobby. And yeah, it was really great. I'm really glad that they let me use this thing because as time went on, it became my own camera. Because it was kind of funny how I would start using it more and more often than my parents would. And then they eventually, it was just kind of like, all right, well, it's mine. It's my camera. So this was my first one. One really cool thing about it was that there was a title feature. So this is the title button right here. And if you wanted to make a title, you would take a piece of paper like this and you would draw something or write whatever it was. And then you hold down this little memory button here. I mean, it was really strange, but you hold that down and then the image would turn into this like black and white monochrome image of what you just filmed. And then you can, you know, change the color right here. So I do all these things. I draw ghosts or whatever and then make them, you know, hover around the room and interact with me or my friends or whatever. There was a remote control that was sold separately. So this was a peripheral for the camera, which I got for my birthday, I think. And it had a lot of functions on here, like you could audio dub. So a lot of times we would record and we would replace the audio with, you know, we dub voices, or I'd put in a narration or sometimes music, you know, whatever. Very crude, I mean, how to do it, but still, this was a huge deal for the time. You could also do what they called an insert record. So that was sort of like the opposite idea, where you would record some audio on here first. I'd have to plug in some headphones and listen to it. And then you could record something which will replace the visual part, but leave the audio. So sometimes if I was doing a music video or something like that, I would do the audio first and then add everything in. But it was really tricky because you had to hear it. You had to tell your friend, you know, exactly when to do whatever it was you're supposed to do. Maybe worth mentioning, I still have the box to the camera. So this is what it came in. And this box, boy, it's been beaten up pretty good, but still, it's still survived. So the one thing that I didn't really like about the camera at the time was that it shot on the small tapes. I mean, yeah, it was a convenience. I can see why most people would see that as a plus because it was smaller, it was lighter, but the recording time was shorter. I wanted something that I could record on for longer, and you know, I always ended up editing my movies onto a second tape. Like I would record onto a second VCR to put it onto a full-size tape anyway. So I figured why not have something that shoots right on it. So for Christmas, Christmas 97, I got this thing here. So this is the case for an RCA full-size camera. I'm going to open it up here. And whoa, that smells. Now, so here it is. The handle is broken. Turn this thing around here. And it's got the hand strap. So there you go. What I really loved about this was that it had a light on the front, and that light worked wonders. The batteries, again, they're pretty heavy. You just slip on the back there, and boy, that adds a lot of back weight. So you typically film with this on your shoulder. like this, but it actually it was a lot steadier than the other one because the VHS-C camera I was always shaking it around, but this you kind of got a little more of a steady shot. Another thing I really liked about this camera was that it had a lot of digital effects, so you could do a negative image or there was this cool mirror effect. Um, there's even letterboxed, which really didn't serve a purpose because all it was doing was covering up the top and the bottom with black bars. But it looked cool because it looked like a real movie. It even had an electronic image stabilizer, which was really cool. Helped you keep, the shot a little steadier. But another cool thing is it had the audio dubbing feature. So it basically had everything that my old camera had without the need of a external remote. This actually became my editing machine, my second VCR. So I'd play back raw footage on a VCR, and on here I would hit record and stop and time it in real time so that I could edit the footage onto a second tape. And then on here is where I would dub the new audio over and put music in and stuff like that. Now, of course, anytime you did music or any audio, it erased all the sound with whatever you were adding. So you couldn't add more than one audio track. So it was really like a live mix you had to do. You had to kind of get all the sounds in there all at once. I was using this camera into 2001. Digital technology was taking over. It was a new field to get into. It was very confusing. All I knew is I was sick of editing analog because actually after this camera, I was also editing on a VCR deck. Like I bought a really fancy VCR deck that made analog editing a little bit easier, but still, I mastered it as much as you possibly could, and it was at the point where I need to edit on computer because that's what it seemed everybody else was doing, but I didn't have a computer that could do it. Didn't have a digital camera. I didn't even understand the concept of analog versus digital. I was like, well, why do you need a different camera to edit on a computer? Like, what's digital? So I was looking into it, and eventually, I'm going to say in late 2001, I got my first digital camera. It's a digital 8, which means it's shot on the 8 millimeter size tapes, which was confusing because there's 8 millimeter film and then there's 8 millimeter video. So that took a little while to figure out. But then they made high 8 tapes. It's the same size as regular 8 millimeter. But if you're filming on high 8, it is still an analog format. But if you use this camera, a digital camera to film on here, it records a digital signal. So you pop this off here and you have all of your outputs right here. That is where the FireWire port was. So you would plug this in. So you would connect the FireWire cable to the computer and you would start capturing your footage. It was a totally new concept for me at the time. I remember this was a big, big deal. I didn't own a computer yet. I had to sort of camp out at the computer labs at the school and wait for a computer to become available, and then you'd have to go there and you'd have to start doing your editing, and it was trial and error. I mean, it was just figuring all this stuff out. My school taught the old-fashioned way. They taught film, editing film even, and which is like actually hand splicing, which nobody even did back then. So a lot of the digital stuff, all students had to sort of teach each other. That was kind of like a community thing. Besides the fact that it was digital, that it also had a flip screen like that. That was a big deal too. Having this, that meant if I wanted to set up the camera over here and film myself, I could actually pop this thing out and, and just see what I'm getting. Before that, it was a guessing game. Also, another thing that was really cool was that it had a night vision camera because it had an infrared light, which I think was right about here. And that was really neat. I'm being able to record in pitch black. I mean, I've never had the purpose to do that lately, but sometimes we would go around and explore like abandoned places or something, and we'd always have that night vision on, with the green, you see that a lot. And that was cool. But I remember one time I broke it by accident. I obviously by accident. I was trying to get a shot on the hood of a car, and the only way I knew how to do it was to put it on a tripod and tie a rope around the car to keep the tripod on there. And so I tested it with the tripod without the camera on it, and drove up and down the street, and I figured I can get like 20-25 miles per hour without it falling off. So I'm like, okay, cool. I put the camera on, go up and down the street, and not a problem. But once I made a turn, when I turned the car around, it just fell. And then that was it. I think luckily the camera survived, but the night vision never worked since. So now, wow, this thing has definitely been beaten up. But this is the first mini DV camera I had. This is, boy, I should explain what happened here, I guess, shouldn't I? So I filmed a fight scene one time, and somebody accidentally kicked the whole front off the camera here, and I had to tape it up. And usually it doesn't look this bad. I used like black electric tape over it, but I guess I had to change it a lot because a lot of times the tape would wear out. So I guess the last time I fixed it, it was this masking tape. So this thing has been really beaten up. So I consider this my first serious camera. So just to give a little bit of context, first of all, it's mini DV. So this is the type of tape it shoots on, which was a lot smaller than the 8mm. But this was the first all digital cassette that I ever recorded on. But the big deal about this camera at the time was that it filmed in 24 frames per second as opposed to 30, which is what most cameras did at the time. Well, it depends. I mean, PAL format cameras are a lot different too in Europe, but basically 24 frames is what film was, and with that type of frame rate, it sort of mimicked the look of film a lot more. And like I said, my film school was all about shooting film. Like it didn't seem like anybody really took you serious if you were shooting video, but this camera changed that. So it was a big investment. I think it was like most of my my student loan for that semester I spent on this camera. And I remember I was like nervous. I was scared when I bought this thing because of how expensive it was. But it was worth it because people saw that, teachers, fellow students, and were like, wow, is that video? And since then, it became a trend. Then everybody started buying this. Not everybody, but like a lot of people were really interested. Because I always saw video as this is where the future is going. This is, the way it's going. Everybody's going to shoot on video eventually. Back then, the majority opinion seemed to be film is always going to look better. That's just the way it is. And maybe that's true, but the convenience of video is going to soon take over. I was, all about jumping on to new technology. So I think this might have been one of the first times where I was sort of like ahead of the game a little bit. What I really liked about it was this snap zoom here. You could actually set it to an electronic zoom, the TW where you rock back and forth, that was real common. You could do a slow zoom, but then there's a switch down here where you unlock it, and then you can really just go whoop, whoop, and it just zooms in and out really fast. You might have seen it a lot on a lot of the Angry Video Game Nerd episodes. And here's your focus. You can focus it manually. This camera shot most of the Angry Video Game Nerd episodes. I mean, it was in all the early episodes, all the way up to maybe close to episode 100. I think this was when you would plug this into an old TV with the old aspect ratio 4:3, and you'd look at it. This camera looked nice. It looked really great. But eventually, HD was taking over. So that was the next thing, the next bandwagon to jump on. And since I had a Panasonic camera here, I figured I might as well stay with the brand because I'm used to it. So the next camera I got was the HVX. And I made a mistake when I bought this. It was probably like the first time I really wasn't happy with the camera I bought because, the idea was that I was trying to upgrade to HD. HD was the biggest reason to get this. And I wasn't sure how my computer would handle filming on a card because this thing, it films on this big P2 card. So you could put two of them in there, but there were these big cards. They were really expensive. They didn't have that long recording time. So I was a little bit skeptical about the P2 cards, and I knew it was something I'd have to purchase. But this camera also filmed in mini DV. So I figured I could shoot HD on a mini DV cassette. So in case the P2 cards don't work out that great. So I kind of have, I have two options, right? Nope. This camera only shoots HD on the P2 cards. It does not shoot HD on the cassette. Some cameras do. Some cameras did film HD on a mini DV cassette, but this one did not. So I wasn't totally thrilled with this thing, but my next one would be a winner. So this one here, again, sticking with Panasonic, this was the AF100. This one here shot on SD cards. This is the camera that filmed the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, plus a lot of the episodes that you've seen lately. I think it was Dark Castle, like that might have been the first one that was on this camera. The best thing about it is the ability to switch lenses. So you can buy all kinds of lenses. I mean, on the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, we rented like a really expensive, like I'm gonna say it was like a $30,000 like kit. It was like a Zeiss Prime kit, and it looked nice. It looked really nice. So, I mean, you could get into all kinds of technical details. Like I've researched this a lot, and there are criticisms toward every camera. But this one's been great for me for the money, for what this can do. This one was the best for me. It doesn't mean it's the best for you or for everybody else, but this is what worked for me the best. A lot of people at the time were getting into DSLR cameras, which were a lot smaller. With this, I wanted something that had more of the body of a camera. I wanted to be able to plug in XLR cables and just have the same kind of functionality as the Panasonic DVX and the HVX that I'm familiar with. So for the HD format, this was my camera of choice. This is the one that did the best for me. I actually own two of them. It's the same camera that's filming me right now, and this has also been filming the B-roll right over there. But I've had to switch it, so we're doing like, it's all magic. It's all cinema magic right now. There's one thing I found annoying about the camera was the batteries with the compatibility. So here you have the battery for an HVX and DVX, and then here you have the AF100. They look identical. I mean, look at it. But no, they're not compatible. There's something about it that's ever so slightly different where it doesn't work. And what was really a bummer was that right before I bought the AF100, I had just bought a whole bunch of spare batteries, thinking that this was all gonna, it would be the same battery for all the cameras. And nope, I go to put it on and it doesn't work. Now, when talking about different cameras that I've used, there's so many that I didn't even count, like, an iPhone. Nowadays, almost everybody has some kind of device that records video, and it's like in your pocket all the time. So, but this right here, I mean, look at this thing. Look how cute this is. This is a GoPro, and this has been really handy too. Whenever you want to get that like action shot or something where you want to put the camera in like a small space, or in the Angry Video Game Nerd Sega Activator episode, we put this thing on the ceiling and we were able to get all these great shots with Nathan jumping in the air and everything. It was great. Now, of course, you'd have this like protective thing. So you'd put it in here in this plastic case, and there you go. Now, I found the GoPros to be a little bit annoying to use. I don't find them to be really like, I don't know, it's a little awkward to use for some reason. But for a certain type of shot that you need, I mean, this is a good thing to have. It's always kind of like another good tool for your all your cameras. I'm always thinking about the future, and this is my newest camera. This is a Panasonic GH5. I filmed some things on it so far, like I did a movie location tour of Planet of the Apes, where we went to the beach and to some of the locations, and that was filmed on here. Not the same lens though. So this one has the changeable lenses, and this right here, this is a really nice lens. Shoots under low light conditions, really good. This is the reason I got this was because it seemed like everybody's moving to 4K now. I don't think I'm quite there yet, where it's convenient enough for 4K. For many reasons, it's a little harder for me to edit with. It's you have to upgrade one thing, you got to upgrade everything else you own. So I'm still working on it, but I'm thinking this is probably what I'm going to shoot my next movie on. I mean, smaller is good because I can get into like, smaller corners, and I can move it around in ways that I wouldn't be able to do with the bigger size, the AF100. Mainly for, I think, still photography is primary purpose. I think it was designed for. So I can shoot great, family stuff with it. But I am planning to do this for my next movie. It's a little bit more complicated to use than the AF100, so it's not really. It has some setbacks. Thinking ahead to the future, I think this is going to be. This is my next thing for now. Until you know, until the next thing comes along. It always does.